Okay, I clearly didn't get the memo about the beach. So, I mean, come on. Tights, patent leather shoes.
It's in Miami
Embarrassing.
now. It's a new thing. But anyways, Mellody, what a treat to have you on a Sunday. Now, your empire is huge. It spans investing, sports, media, and the very highest levels of corporate America. You've been on the board of Starbucks, DreamWorks, JPMorgan, Estee Lauder. Now, you've broken more glass ceilings than I can count, but the path to get there wasn't easy. So what was it about your upbringing that you take with you now? What do you think motivates you the most?
I think I'm motivated by both the possibility that I could go back to the life that I had when I was a child, which was a challenging life, I've told people that my fire was lit by scarcity. My childhood trauma became my purpose, and a lot of that was around not having money. It was around being evicted and having our lights disconnected and our phone turned off and things like that. And that fear, which was overwhelming as a child, where you have no control whatsoever. It's not like you're 12 and you can get a job. It really did motivate me to be as thoughtful and smart as I could possibly be about how I move forward in life.
So part of this has made you extremely passionate about financial literacy. There was a 2015 Vanity Fair piece about you entitled Why the World Loves Mellody Hobson. And this included Sheryl Sandberg, Bill Bradley, who has been very close to you in your life, Oprah. And in that article, it says that you have been passionate about financial literacy, and it's a goal, a lifetime goal, to make the stock market a regular topic of dinner table conversation. Where do you think you are in that goal right now?
I think I'm making progress. The good thing is I wrote this book for kids about money called Priceless Facts About Money. It's been on the bestseller list, which was very, very exciting for me for children, New York Times bestseller list. And it really is a goal of mine to actually teach the language of money to kids. And I wanted to do it for two reasons. I wanted to have them grow up being financially literate. And the book has these amazing facts, really, that sort of stop you in your tracks. And I thought I could use the kids as a gateway to their parents. And so my real job is to get the parents to focus on this issue, because more than 3/4 of adults have a lot of money fears and money anxieties. They would rather talk to their kids about a condom than a credit card based upon their own lack of understanding of these issues. And we basically adapt our parents' money habits. So if our parents live paycheck to paycheck or overspend or are great savers, the child is watching and adapting that behavior. And in our society today, it's actually even harder on some of these issues to teach kids about money, because at very young ages, watching money spit out of a machine like an ATM or a watch pay for something, or credit cards and debit cards, the idea of its finality becomes very, very, very hard for a child to understand. So one of the things that I've wanted to do is try to work through this issue with parents on behalf of children, so we raise money smart kids who go into life more prepared to deal with the financial issues which every single person walking the planet will have to deal with in different degrees. If you live in a village in Africa or in Miami here, money is a part of your life every single day, no matter who you are. It is a universal truth.
And to the point that you're making, I've covered finance for Bloomberg as the chief financial correspondent for 10 years, and I learned so much through that book. I did not know that Alexander Hamilton was selling bonds out of his house on Wall Street. You know, the other thing about this is an interesting story that I had never heard before. You told my colleagues just a couple of weeks ago. So you were approached a number of years ago to take a stake in the Denver Broncos. But you said no. First you said no. And you said no, and then one of the partners had come to you and said that they could make it about financial literacy.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, it's so, you never know what'll happen in life. So I was approached about this Denver Broncos stake. The team was being sold. The family that was buying it was a family that I knew, the Walton Penner Group. And they'd come to me and they said, you'd make a great partner with us. And I was like, no. What do I know about this? I like sports a lot. And I just hadn't, I didn't have a direct tie. And I said, why would I do this, etc. Then a friend of mine said, just think, this is the biggest platform in sports in the world. even in America especially, when you think about the most valuable league is the NFL, and when you think about what you could do around financial literacy with athletes and how you could be a part of changing the narrative on the huge salaries they receive and what kind of generational wealth they could pass on, I got excited about it. And then I realized after we announced that we were doing this and that we had won the right to own the team, I must have received, I'm not joking, maybe 2,000 emails. And I remember going into my husband's office and I said to him, people really love sports. And it really, it opened up a whole new world to me to think about the leverage that sports could bring, not in selling an idea, but in selling educational ideas that could be super important for the life of the athletes.
So in learning more and more about you, I've learned a lot about how to navigate my own career. Frankly, at this point, you have so many words of wisdom, and you have so many words of wisdom that you take from the people around you. For example, another part of a story that was left off in a podcast I was listening to was how you always wanted to sit next to Howard Schultz in board meetings. What did you learn from Howard, and is he even one of the most influential people you've learned from? Who are the biggest mentors to you in your career?
There are so many. I mean, I can't even name all of them, but I was on the board of Starbucks for 20 years until last Wednesday. 20 years.
Emotional.
My last board meeting was on Tuesday, and the annual meeting was on Wednesday. That was my last day after 20 years of being on the board. And when I walked into the boardroom, I was just a pipsqueak. I was really young versus the other board members, and I didn't know anything. And I sat to the right of Howard at this board table, the same boardroom for the entire 20 years, maybe with an upgrade or two along the way. And I realized at one point that I always sat next to him very intentionally because someone came to be new on the board and she was sitting in my seat. And I remember thinking to myself, she's in my seat. And everyone was standing up watching this, and I grabbed a chair and I said, everyone move down. And so people said, why did you sit next to Howard? And I said, because I wanted to observe what he would react to in a meeting and see if I could learn from it. So if something was said and he wrote it down, I'd be thinking to myself, why is this important? What is it that he's trying to think about? What is he noting that could teach me something about business or leadership or whatever it might be? And it's probably a little, in hindsight for him, like a little creepy that I was watching him that closely, but I really was because I wanted to learn.
What are some of the qualities of very successful business leaders? Now, you're the co-CEO and president of Ariel, but having served on these boards also, you've been able to witness Howard Schultz, Jamie Dimon, Jeff Katzenberg, so many people really build these massive businesses. For people who might want to rise in their own careers, what should they know about people like that?
Well, I would tell you that they have vision, and you can't teach vision. Howard always said, if you play basketball, you can't teach height. It's very hard to teach vision. You either have it or you don't. They're very relentless. And that vision, I think, is very important because they see something other people don't see, and they're willing to be relentless about it. So just think about starting Starbucks when everyone drank Folgers. And you say, I'm going to start a company where you're going to go and buy a cup of coffee, and you're just going to buy a cup of coffee. Now, of course, we sell food and things like that, but that was really the point. And it's going to be a great cup of coffee. Now, when you think about that, decades and decades ago, that was way advanced. We can't even imagine that. Yes, there was the coffee shop, but there was never a coffee shop that one could conceive of having 38,500 stores, which is what Starbucks has in 82 countries, and exporting that around the world and changing the whole game about how you think about coffee. Well, Howard had that vision, and you have to give him credit for it and then realize that vision takes a Herculean effort. Everyone else that I can think of that has succeeded in business, I start first with, you have to have a good idea that is differentiated. It's gotta be different than someone else's. If you're a dry cleaner, you do something different as a dry cleaner. Maybe you have a different delivery schedule. You deliver in the middle of the night or at 6 in the morning. I don't know what it is. If you have whatever business that you start, how do I separate myself from the others that are out there doing something similar? I have this rule at Ariel. We're an investment firm. We manage mutual fund portfolios for people's kids' college educations and 401k plans and their retirement money. And we have a turtle as a logo. And I always tell people in my firm, if you can put your hand over our name and drop in the name of any company, any of these companies that you see in these booths around you, and it makes sense, it is not Ariel. You have to read the materials and say to yourself, why is this company stealing Ariel's information? And that's how I know that we've stayed with our distinctiveness. We have a turtle as a logo. We talk about slow and steady winning the race. We have such a point of view about investing. It should be different, even if there are 1,000 investment firms. How can we stand out in our point of view? And one is honestly our turtle. You know, when you think about the ferocious logos that companies have had, lions, bulls, all sorts of things, no one thinks of a turtle. But the Aesop's fable, which unites all the ways we think about investing, long-term patience, stick-to-itness, diligence, it really pays off the idea of what we're trying to do.
Speaking of, you know, when everyone is sitting here today, it's been a rocky couple of weeks. It's been a tough run in the market lately. In fact, we had you on TV in October and you expressed concerns about just how concentrated the market had gotten, and that was why you had more conviction in your strategy. I want to call back another story I read about you about 2008. Your husband at the time told you what was different about living in Chicago during a snowstorm. And maybe talk through about that example and what that taught you about now. Is there anything to take from 2008 for anyone who has not seen a downturn, which is actually a lot of people here?
Yeah, a lot of people have not seen, you know, we've been in a bull market for 13 years, something like that. Yeah, there were some pullbacks along the way during COVID and the like. The COVID pullback was dramatic, but brief. We saw a recovery in less than, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And so we haven't really seen sustained bear market environments really since '08. And one of the things that we have felt is that the market was, as you've suggested, very frothy, very concentrated in the Magnificent Seven, those stocks, I call them celebrity stocks. Those celebrity tech stocks that are unbelievable businesses, but were priced for perfection. You can be a great company and not always a great stock. And that's something that we keep in mind. And so those companies were getting bigger and bigger in the index. They were considered bulletproof. They can't go down. This year, obviously, we've seen a very different environment. And I talked about the fact that, and we see this right now, the market is very volatile. We've obviously had a tough run here these last few weeks. Friday, we ended on an up note, but we've had many down days in a row. And the market hates uncertainty. And there's a lot of uncertainty right now. So as a result of that, we're seeing some swings and some whipsawing that people haven't seen before. And in '08, when I went through this for the first time, and I thought about the 3 times in my career where it was really, that you feel uncomfortable. I thought about it, and one was in '08, which was one of the toughest periods for our firm. And my husband, and I make the joke, I married Yoda's dad. My husband, who was very, very wise, said to me, "What do you know when you live in Chicago?" During this brutal period for our firm and for the markets. And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "You never look up at a snowstorm. When you're in the middle of a snowstorm, you only watch your feet. Your goal is to get to the next location. If you look up at the storm, you will become overwhelmed and you will fall." And I think this is one of those periods. We are in a bit of a storm. I don't know how significant it'll be, if it'll abate very quickly, but we are certainly seeing uncertainty, and we've seen some ground give from under us. And this is not a time to look up at all that, because there's nothing you can do. So you watch your feet to be very consistent and patient. And in this kind of environment, especially sometimes, and people don't believe it, some of the stocks where I have our biggest positions for our family personally, I don't look. I will make myself not look so I don't have any emotional reaction, because I do believe in Jack Bogle, who started the Vanguard Group, who said, in times of great market uncertainty, don't do something, stand there. You don't sell into these difficult periods. You want to stand and be a bit resilient during this until there's a bit more calm where you can see where things are going.
How do you think about Ariel's legacy right now in terms of, okay, you've been contrarian investors, have taken many pages out of the Warren Buffett playbook, looked at small and mid-cap stocks, not followed the herd into those kind of celebrity stocks as you're talking about, but you've also expanded. You've also expanded quite meaningfully to start your first private equity strategy. Ariel Alternatives began under you. It started with Project Black. Where is it now? How is the alternatives business expanding at Ariel, and how does it fit into your core missions?
Well, let's start off with, we started expanding years ago. So we cut our teeth in small and mid-cap value investing. We believe markets are efficient. And so we want to go where people aren't. And so we're not going to be in the hottest, most popular stocks. We're going to be in areas of the market where we think we can do original research and outperform. And so smaller companies tend to have less analysts following them and creates an opportunity for us to outperform, and especially in the last few years where all the market energy has gone to the celebrity stocks, the Mag 7. And so lots of smaller companies have been orphaned in this market. They aren't even in the benchmark, and we get excited about that. Then we expanded into international and global, which interestingly has been taking second seat to the US for the last few years until this year. And now the international stocks are outperforming the US because these cycles happen. And then last but not least, we started to branch into emerging markets, another area hated, but also out of favor. And so we try to go where other people are shying away from it based upon our beliefs over the long term. That's how you make real money. In recent periods, we've been in private equity, and the one that we're doing right now, which is an offshoot of what we were doing with what I was doing personally with sports, we're now doing women's sports. And I call women's sports, we have a fund which we've called Project Level the playing field, level up, level best. Think of all the ways you can use level. Project Level is us investing in women's sports. Our first investment is that we're part owner of the Denver women's soccer team expansion, the 16th team to be created in the US, Denver, so it made sense for us. And one of the things I think about women's sports, I call women's sports the small caps of sports. So the most valuable women's sports team in the United States is the Angel City soccer team in Los Angeles, which Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, and his wife Willow Bay bought for $250 million. The most expensive men's sports team in the United States is the Dallas Cowboys, which is estimated to be worth $11 billion. There is a giant difference between $250 million and $11 billion. And you don't have to get to $11 billion for have these women's sports teams and women's sports-related businesses to have them do extremely well. And the one reason we have so much conviction about it, all of the data is pointing up. Viewership, attendance, sponsorship, media rights. We could go through all the things where the women's sports are seeing just a new level of interest. They've been discovered even though the athletes have been amazing for a long time. Last year's NCAA final, yes, there was Caitlin Clark. Women's NCAA finals had 5 million more viewers than men. 18 million plus versus 13 million plus for men. If I showed you how women's soccer viewership has gone up internationally over the last, just looking at the World Cup as an example, I think in 2012, 1.2 billion people watched the finals. In 2016, 1.6 billion people watched the finals. The numbers keep going up. So this is the kind of thing we look at the math and we say to ourselves, in a decade or two, we will be excited, not only now, but as the value of these businesses, the value that is there is unlocked and the growth continues, we'll be excited that we own these teams and are invested in these businesses.
Now, not only is sports one of the hottest area for investment, institutional investment.
But not women's sports. This is the white space in sports.
So how big is the dream?
It's big. Go big or go home. I mean, we're going to do something substantial. We want to be a meaningful owner of the businesses that we buy, which means we'll go in and we will raise a significant amount of money.
Now, if I've learned anything through studying you too, is that you're very intentional in the way you pick your bets. You almost turned down the Denver Broncos, as we had talked about. So how did this all
Which ended up being a great investment, because everyone that sold after us sold for a lot more. So
we're glad we got in. But how about this one? For Project Level, how did it all come together?
It came together. I had been studying it. A friend mentioned women's sports to me at the end of 23. I spent a lot of the year of 24 studying, doing research. I'm like a 12-year-old who knows baseball stats when it comes to women's sports. I could give you so many stats about what's happening there. And by the summer, we started to really get serious about, yes, maybe we'll do this. Then in the fall, I watched Jason Wright, the former president of the Washington Commanders, on a panel at a conference, and he blew me away. And I ran up to him on the panel and I said, I need to spend time with you. And he said, okay. Within a week or two, we were meeting in New York, and I said, I have this vision. And I said, I'm trying to solve this problem. And so I laid it out, and I just got him a little bit interested. And so I would just throw things at him saying, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And within a few weeks, he was doing a lot of work. And ultimately, I said, what if you joined us and you worked with us on this, knowing his operational expertise, having run the Commanders, turned around that team, worked on a new stadium, all these things would be so valuable with women's sports that would give us an advantage as we were going in to invest. And he said yes.
So that's how it all came together. I think one thing that was a very interesting question you were asked by my colleagues and A-Rod just a couple weeks ago was what you can take from sports investing back into the world of investing.
A lot.
But what about the other way? What do you take from your decades of experience at Ariel and the way you think about sports investing?
Long term. These are not get-rich-quick schemes. These are businesses. When you look at women sports in general, the value gets created over time, and that is something that we see very, very clearly. So it's not that you turn this around and you turn a profit in 2 days. It's not that. Although we can tell you we've been really, really excited about the early indications on what we're seeing already. The other thing is, so you have to take a long-term view. The other thing is we invest where there is value. So I'm not trying to buy an $11 billion team, which is, again, a celebrity team, right? Great team. We all wish we owned it. Right. I agree with you. But I got my team, and I love my team, the Broncos. But these teams are very, very valuable, but their valuations are higher. We're going where the valuations are lower, and so there's more upside from here. And so that is directly applicable to what we've been doing for decades at Ariel. And then going where other people are missing it. We see something here and others don't see it in the same way. And so we can be early. That's okay with us. But we think that the investment pays off over time.
Where does this go next? What are some of the other types of leagues that you're interested in? I mean, the Denver soccer team is something that, of course, a lot of people are excited about. There's clear interest in women's soccer. When you watch how many women are entering it at a young age, what else?
So just to give you an example, Denver, when we announced the team, within 3 days of announcing, we sold 5,200 season tickets with people putting down real money. Within 3 days, thousands of tickets have been sold since then. So just to give you that sense, for a team that will play in its own stadium in 2028. So, that gives you a sense of the interest. We like the major leagues, so we like NBA, WNBA, we like soccer, European soccer. We like emerging leagues. There are a lot of emerging leagues that are out there, everything from lacrosse and volleyball and flag football and a lot of things that are coming along. We like junior sports. What shocked me, I have an 11-year-old, anyone with children, the amount of money that we spend on kids' sports is stunning at all income levels. And so junior sports, we think, is a great opportunity for investment as those franchises get nationalized in everything from soccer to basketball, again, so many different leagues. And then we like businesses that benefit from the growth in women's sports that are ancillary businesses. We see ourselves investing in the related stadiums of the teams that we own. So there are a lot of ways we think that we can benefit and play in the women's sports arena.
So project level, certainly, it was really only just a couple months ago now that it was announced that this was happening. I want to also give you a moment to talk about the progress made with Project Black as well, because that was kind of the first time you announced Ariel Investments, and the work that you've been doing from the C-suite and as an investor for minority and women communities across the country can't be understated. How far has it come?
This is an amazing statistic. So just so you know, in the United States today, there are only 5 businesses that are Black-owned that have over $1 billion in revenue in the entire United States. So think of all the businesses that exist, the thousands of companies. Think of the thousands that have over $1 billion in revenue, and only 5 are Black. During COVID, when we were locked in, we were doing a lot of research. I said one of the things about COVID, I said, I want to slingshot out of this period, not limp out. As some people, they've been locked inside. I said, let's be really creative. Let's think very broadly about what the opportunities are. And one of the things we saw very clearly was this need for minority businesses of scale in this country. If you were a big company, a Fortune 10, a Fortune 50 company, you don't want to write 100 separate $2 million purchase orders in order to have an inclusive group of businesses that you work with. You'd like to write one $200 million purchase order. But we didn't have, and we don't have yet, the number of Black and brown businesses of scale to be able to receive that business. And so we said, what if we go out and buy them? We buy middle market businesses that through our ownership become, my word, minoritized. Those businesses with board diversity and with leadership diversity and sharing equity in the organization create the opportunity for minority businesses of scale to exist. And maybe in a decade or two, we could create a half dozen of those businesses. So instead of having 5, you could double the number and ultimately create scaled minority businesses while the wealth gap in our country could start to be diminished over time. I think that we have been pioneering in what we have done there. We have been pioneering in how we did it. We raised a fund for our first time fund, $1.45 billion. We were super bold. Our fund has a 25-year life because we said we want to give these businesses a real chance to grow. And when we went to corporations to invest in our businesses, we said the minimum was $100 million. And people just thought I was nuts. They're like, you've never done this before, you're gonna ask for $100 million. But the thesis was really tight. And how we knew that we would execute it, and the people that we brought together with Ariel Alternatives and Project Black had pristine backgrounds and careers. And that has been something that we are prosecuting right now. We own 3 companies, and we're actively investing the assets.
Since we don't have a whole lot of time here, one question I have for you is going back to kind of where we started. I was asking you intentionally at that point, what were the great qualities of the great leaders you've been around? But now I want to ask you, what do you think your legacy is going to be as a leader?
It's interesting because I heard this statistic. I saw Gayle King on television talking about this. She said that the only people who will remember you at the most are your great-grandchildren who will have any recollection or knowledge of you. After that, the generation after that won't remember you. And that was something that really sat with me. So it's like people talk about legacies, and it's like your own great-great-grandchildren won't really know much about you. Maybe you'll just be an idea or some information that they've heard about. But legacies, they're very hard to build legacies that last. And so I don't think about that. I actually think about the here and the now. What am I going to do in this life, at this moment, with my agency, with my power or influence that can be meaningful for people who are walking the planet today? Whatever happens 100 years from now as it relates to my name, who knows? But at least in terms of this moment, trying to be as thoughtful, inclusive, hardworking, intentional as I can possibly be, understanding that I received way more in life than I ever could have imagined, and because of that, I owe a lot back to society.
It's the number one thing I've been learning from you is the art of gratitude. Mellody, thank you so very much for your time today. It has been a blast to join you all.
Thank you.